Call to order the City Council work session for City of East Grand Forks for Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. Would City Clerk please call roll?
Here.
Council President Holte.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Reid.
Here.
Council Members Clarence Vetter.
Here.
Ben Pakshavinsky.
Here.
Dale Helms.
Here.
Brian Larson.
Here.
Karen Peterson.
Here.
Does term quorum. Number 1, SRF Consulting Bridge Study Update. Reid.
All right, thank you, Mr. President, council members, good evening. Two-part to the presentation tonight. I'm joined by Mr. Ken Holte on Zoom. Ken's with SRF Consulting, who is the consultant that was hired to conduct the bridge study for us. Two-part for his presentation tonight. Number 1, to give an update on the scoping phase of the study, which has been ongoing since mid-April of 2023, which is nearly wrapping up. And then the second part, to be able to update and describe in more detail the grant opportunity that's available in front of us, called the RAISE grant. It's a federal funding opportunity that could be available for planning and potential future design of any new bridges connecting our communities. So with that, Ken, I think I'll hand it over to you, and you should have the ability to be able to share your screen for your presentation, Ken.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. And hopefully you can see that screen there real quick now. So good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. As Reid introduced myself, I am Ken Holte. I'm the project manager for the scoping phase of the study we've done. I provided a slide presentation. It's a lengthy number of slides. I will try to cover them in brevity. However, if there is some content there that you feel you'd like me to address more directly, please feel free to grab my attention, and we will certainly talk about that. As we get started in this, get my cursor in the right spot here. Thank you. We will talk a little bit about how we started this. And it's important to keep in mind that the overall development of a project of this magnitude really comes in 5 pretty distinct stages. Planning, scoping, the NEPA process, which includes the preliminary design, final design, and then of course construction. As was just mentioned, we are wrapping up phase 2, the scoping piece, which is a lot of foundational elements, a lot of data gathering, understanding some of the past histories, and I'm going to touch base on that a little bit more as we go forward here. And it really sets up the stage of going into the NEPA process. And the NEPA process is really where a lot of decisions are made regarding a project of this magnitude. It looks at a lot of the variety of alternatives, and a project of this type, interstate, certainly over a river, federal jurisdictions are involved, really starts, and you have to kind of take the funnel effect, whereby you start with the funnel at the top and you pour a bunch of options and ideas in it, and as you work your way down the funnel, basically what drops out the bottom is your preferred solution. That preferred solution is based on analysis, and you have to prove its worth to the federal government that it's solving the problem that you have defined, and it's going to be worthy of the dollars to be expenditure. There's a couple of key components that come into this, and those are identified with the stars. And in the long run, the first step is the purpose and need, defining what is the purpose of the project and what is that need you're covering, what is it you're trying to accomplish. The alternatives evaluation and the process and the criteria that you use to evaluate alternatives against themselves in a head-to-head manner are important. Ultimately, you get a preferred alternative, and that's a very distinct approval step. And then ultimately, on the end product is the environmental document, which you also need to be approved before you go into final design, and work forward from there. What we've done in this process, because there are certain timelines associated with the actual NEPA components, which are some of that alternative screening, the defining of the preferred alternative, and the NEPA document. What's happening now is there's a lot more emphasis to get as much, I'll say, pre-work done in front before that timeline actually kicks in. And so from that standpoint, we're doing a PEL study is what we're proposing to do. That's the Planning and Environmental Linkages Study. So that starts with a lot of the early legwork, if you will. Some of the logical termini, the PEL scoping, and we've just completed some of that, and I'll touch base on that in a minute. The definition of the purpose and need. That's a very distinct and a current concurrence point. And once we kind of get to these concurrence points, it helps to lock us in so we don't get some of these questions from the reviewing agencies that cause us to backtrack. That's a set in time, and we get to move forward from there. It's also very important there. So there's a couple of important steps there to help us streamline how we do the work, how we approach it, and step into this as we go forward. So from the standpoint of the scoping phase, really of what we've done here so far, and we are pretty much on the final legs here. We originally started with 8 tasks that we had defined. 6 of these have already been accomplished. Number 6 and number 7 are the ones that are wrapping up right now, and we'll touch base on a little bit of that. From the standpoint of looking at some of the previous studies that was done, we have looked at a lot of number of studies that have been done through the MPO and through the cities and the local agencies involved. We've actually created a technical memo to help summarize the particular studies. We looked at, what kind of data was collected, what kind of traffic analysis, if it did hydraulic analysis. We looked at what kind of public engagement was used and how that evolved, and just tried to gauge how receptive and effective that was. And so we tried to summarize a bunch of that so we could plan forward and go from there. We also heard about a number of other studies that have been done long range, particularly through the Corps of Engineers, and so we've tried to accomplish that and try to kind of tally all these up together here to understand what's been happening. It's a very good feeder into the Pell work that we want to do. What it's really done is it's really shown us what's happened up and down the river corridor, and it's provided good coverage of the options that have been discussed there, and starts to lead us into what we believe are going to be good options going forward to be looked at in the Pell study as well there. We actually had a number of really good conversations with the agencies, both at the DOT level and the federal level. The federal level being the Federal Highway Administration, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the U.S. Coast Guard. Some of those federal agencies, particularly at this stage, are hard to get to the table, to be perfectly honest. But it's worked out really well. It took us a while to get a hold of them. I'll show a schedule that showed the summertime. Things were a little slow for us, but come this past fall, we really started to engage, and we learned some really good pieces of information. From the DOT perspective, one of our initial meetings there, we basically found out three things we wanted to share. North Dakota does not have a process or is accomplished in using the Pell study approach. However, MnDOT does. So the two DOTs did agree that we could follow the MnDOT approach, and North Dakota would tag along, and I'll say sort of learn, but be aware of how things will evolve with a known process that's been out there. It was identified that the purpose and need will be the primary goal of the Pell, but there's some opportunities to expand that and get into the alternatives analysis and start to whittle away at some of those options to help us in the next phase, which would be the NEPA process. So there's some opportunity there. Both DOTs agreed that there really isn't any state or federal infrastructure at the moment that's directly affected by the project. And the project right now is a very vague term, because we know it's an east-west corridor, and that's about as far as you can really define it. And most of those east-west roadways right now are going to be state or city or county related. Now, ultimately, when we get to the ends, now there could be some impact, but basically the DOTs were agreeable to allowing the local agencies to be the lead and continue to pursue this in that manner. So I think that was also a positive effect for us. With respect to the Federal Highway Administration, same scenario. The North Dakota Federal Highway Office really does not have a Pell process. They've not really used that much. They don't have a lot of background there. Minnesota does. So the two federal highway offices agreed that we would follow the Minnesota approach. That ties directly into the Minnesota DOT approach. That makes our life a little simpler in that regards. And so we've got some examples that we can follow, and we've tried to take that on. There are a couple of components that were identified through the federal highway that are very important here as well, too. One, they identified that they felt that the previous works were really focused on individual river crossing locations and looked at just small zones of, an area as opposed to a longer stretch of the river corridor as a whole. So what the Federal Highway Administration offices have directed is that they're looking at a longer corridor from a transportation network system and looking at a transportation significance that will include a river crossing. So there's some subtlety, nuance in the language there, but it's an important differentiating in how the feds are going to evaluate our approach and acceptance of what we want to do there. The other thing that the feds were pretty adamant about, and this is all projects in the NEPA process really, is you cannot enter this into a predetermined solution. You can't really say, we want to look at this, that, and the other thing, and that's all we're going to evaluate to see which one of those wins. It really needs to be a data-driven process that is very open to starting very broad at the beginning, again, kind of that funnel approach. So as you knock down things and you find fatal flaws, which can happen actually fairly quickly, but you start broad and you whittle down into the final version there. So that was important. One of the things that we also saw from the Federal Highway Administration is that they actually gave us this graphic, and I know it's a little fuzzy, that's how it came to us, but within the Pell process that they do have a definition of, there are also 4 distinct concurrence points. And in particular, the very first one is that they must approve the Pell scope of work before you start marching down the path and start doing the work. So getting that concurrence point, getting their written approval, quite frankly, on this, we agree that your approach is acceptable to us, is an important step. So we hadn't heard that before, but we've actually started to engage them in that conversation, and we've started to overlap the end of the scoping phase and the beginning of the Pell phase to try and take advantage of some synergies that we've got going on here as well here too. From some of the more local agencies, particularly the DNRs and the Department of Waters on the Minnesota side, looking at some of the components of and how they're going to be involved and what they know even about the Pell process, because they will have certain regulatory authorities that we'll need to accomplish here. The DNRs will be participating agencies in the project, and they were very agreeable. They met with us a couple of times and helped us to kind of shape a couple things. There is an important component that we did learn from the DNRs and the DWR, is that basically the permitting landscape has really changed in the last couple of years with respect to how the floodways are being approached. And in specific, there's a couple of bullet points I want to highlight here. The third bullet point down here, from the Minnesota side anyway, the Minnesota DNR approach is that they are now saying that they do not allow any approach fill within the 100-year floodway. So this is a different interpretation of a rule that's been in place since 1978. So this is causing a bit of a ripple effect across the entire state of Minnesota because they're now interpreting this rule. So basically what this could end up doing is, from some of the previous work where you're trying to shorten the bridge because bridges are expensive, and when you do that, you're in the floodways and you have to analyze the river to check your stage increases back upstream. But they're not going to allow that now. So this could, in fact, increase some of the bridge lengths that were previously identified anywhere from 10 to 30%. And that's just a very conceptual, quick and dirty look on our part. But that's a significant cost in some certain issues. Doesn't mean those projects are eliminated. Doesn't mean that that interpretation on the Minnesota side is also going to be the exact interpretation on the North Dakota side. North Dakota was a little more standoffish in that regards, and the two agencies were going to talk. I gave this same presentation to the city of Grand Forks last night. I maybe didn't make a couple of those points as clear as I should have, but it's important for us to know it will impact what we do going forward, but it's not a deal breaker or something that we can lean on now to say this, that, or whatever may or may not be in a future study or may not be compatible with what the two cities or communities are hoping to accomplish. But it is an important new feature that we learned. From the standpoint of the Army Corps of Engineers, again, they're going to be a cooperating agency as well, and we've met with them very much. The basic rule of thumb here is that they have two particular permits that we need to coordinate with. The Section 408, as it particularly relates to the flood control items out there, and they have told us that we will need to prove that we do not do any detrimental effect to the flood control system, which is certainly what we want to accomplish, but they're going to be very specific about how they analyze that, review that, and we'll need to present that information going forward. That'll happen further down into the study process. They also have the Section 404 of the Clean Waters Act. That's a regularity, but again, something that we'll need to be very conscious of and going forward there. In regards to the Coast Guard, we had a meeting with them, and that again is very rare. I've actually got another river crossing that's much further down the line, and we're trying to get a permit from them, and quite frankly, we can't get much of a response from them. So getting them to the table was quite good. The project actually does border on 2 Coast Guard districts, so they were a little standoffish about which district would take the lead. That's okay, we don't need that at this point in time, but they were agreeable to be there and interested in how the Pell study would work. Was another component that we found to be a positive component going forward there as well. So that's some of the other coordination items from some of those 8 tasks that we had originally. One of the last tasks that we completed out of the scoping phase was really to look at the funding sources. So we did do a research into a lot of the funding opportunities that are out there, particularly at the federal level, but also state and locally. We did create a technical memo on that, had a meeting with our PMT, which has representatives from all the 4 participating agencies locally there. And we'll be able to continue to monitor those as we go forward, one of which is the RAISE grant, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes here as we go forward as well. So of the last 2 components that are still in our scoping task is what's currently underway. So what we have done is we have developed a scope of work for the Pell study. We have identified 13 tasks that need to be accomplished that will account for the 4 particular concurrence points that the Federal Highway has told us about that they will need to have. We have drafted that, we reviewed that with the PMT, and we shared that with the local representatives. We've already sent that to the Federal Highway Administration to begin their review of that work. We think there will probably be a couple of iterations of some language and just verification, but they've been agreeable to start that. They need 30 days for their initial review, so we're hoping to get some feedback from them by the end of January of this year. So we're already just about halfway there, believe it or not. So that's a good thing as well. Another piece of this is to develop a budget with that. We'll do that once we kind of get the first set of comments back. We're going to start building what we think the value of that is. And then the third piece of that really is the schedule as well. So this is a pretty basic schedule that we shared with our PMT members, how we think this is going to shape out. We're now building this into more of a critical path identification and tying the various tasks together. I think some work will push more into the middle. It looks pretty heavily front-loaded when you look at it in this manner, but there are a lot of sub tasks that tie and promote the next steps, if you will. So we'll be looking to dive into that pretty quickly as we go into that too. So we'll be cleaning that up as well. So there. So with that, then there is, when you get done with the scoping phase, then where do we go? Well, the next step would be to go into, oops, excuse me, I got my notes all wrong here. I skipped one. So with respect to this particular schedule for the Pell study too, calling attention to what we've got there at the end of February, the big blue star there in the upper left, that would actually be where we hope to achieve the first official concurrence point, number 1, with respect to the concurrence on the scope of work language. So if we can get that really starts to trigger everything else that we can go forward from there. So where do we go to next? What's currently out there, and we presented, is that the RAISE grant from the federal government opportunities were presented. I think they came out just the end of October. So there's some real interesting components to this that we like. One, it is monies that is available for planning. So certainly the work that we're doing now, are going to be doing in the future is eligible. And I'll actually go to the bottom bullet point here. That's probably the most important part. Planning, preparation, and design. So we did the little fact finding. So things like environmental analysis, community outreach, the feasibility studies, cost analysis, prelim design, but also including final design. So that might be quite a ways down the road right now, but we will make some, I'll say, very large guesstimates of what that could be, and we can pursue that. Probably the most important or intriguing piece of this planning grant is that there are no matching funds required. East Grand Forks area qualifies as a rural community because your overall population is less than 200,000. And so that means you can ask for everything. You can ask for everything that would be involved with the future development of this project, and that's real money there. Now, there is a bit of a deadline here. The applications are due the end of February. They're a 25-page document, so they do take some getting together here. So we've actually kind of started a few things now to start prepping some templates for letters of support and maybe even some community council actions. We want to start laying out a schedule and getting prepared. So should you decide to go, we want to be able to jump on this right away here. So a couple of things that we're looking at there too. One item, there was just a workshop yesterday with respect to the RAISE grants, so we're still learning a few new things. One of the things that we found yesterday is that the way these grants work is that they are considered a reimbursement program. And so what that means is that once you are awarded, and the awards would come out or be announced roughly in June, late June of this year, once you are awarded, then you go through the process of signing the official agreement. What we've now learned, I think here it says 12 months, it does. What we heard yesterday was it's now actually taking anywhere from 15 to 18 months to get the agreements in place. Once you have the agreement signed, then you are eligible to start spending that grant money. And what that means is you're not written a check lump sum and said, here's your grant, congratulations, go forward. Basically, it means that you have to be aware of some cash flow opportunities whereby you would pay for the continuing development of the study and then be able to apply for reimbursement of those payments as you go forward. So there's just something to be conscious of the mechanism of how that would work. But again, the beauty is if you get one of these, you get 100% reimbursement. So we can be a little bold in what our request is to make sure we're covered there, in my opinion. So that's kind of it on a nutshell there with respect to the RAISE grant. The scoping phase that we're currently in, and now is wrapping up. As I mentioned earlier, when you look at kind of the middle of the schedule here, a little slow because we had some trouble getting a hold of the federal agencies. But as you get into the last quarter of last year, and now as we've dove into the first part of this year, we're wrapping up all those meetings. We've learned a lot. It has helped us develop that scope. The blue bar that you see down there, we've actually introduced now that part where the FHWA is reviewing that scope of work. So we've kind of taken on a little extra. We're going to overlap a couple things and kind of take advantage of some momentum we have in front of us. And then what we believe is that will then carry us forward into the draft. It's the same schedule as I showed there earlier. One of the things we are looking at is that the Pell study does appear to be about a 20 or 21 month process. As we do a little bit more, we might be able to skinny that to 18, but the reality is it takes a little while. But this is the true start of doing a comprehensive review of multiple alternatives in a head-to-head format that's really going to drive at what is the best solution in the grand scheme of things throughout the river corridor that we have here. And that is about as fast as I can cover the last 9 months or so. And I certainly would welcome any questions I could handle.
Reid, do you have anything to add before I go to questions?
No, nothing to add.
Does anybody have any questions then? Ken, I do have a question for you. So this grant, and I guess my understanding that this can be used no matter for the whole project and the whole study and everything, all the way up and down the corridor of the river. It's not just for an intercity bridge. It could be out, could be the Merrifield, could be anything.
Yep.
It covers everything. So I think it'd be short-sighted of us not going forward with it and making sure that we have the opportunity to go after these funds.
Yeah, I would. You're absolutely right. So right now, so this goes back to the Federal Highway Administration about no predetermined solution. So right, we're planning. We really don't know what the exact solution is at the moment. Right. So this is where we get to be a little bold. So if we thought a particular location was like the worst case scenario, the most expensive, or we thought there might be, right, can we get a combination of bridges to solve this? You have the ability to ask for all of that right now. So that's the beauty of it too, right? So I'll be honest, go big.
Right.
And then you're going to be covered in the long run here, yeah.
Like I said, I think it'd be short-sighted if we didn't move forward with it. I think, City of East Grand Forks take on, $500 million or whatever it would cost to do some of these things, and not be able to have the opportunity to go back and get them reimbursed I don't think we would have the funds to do it. I think knowing that and knowing where we're at right now, I think that hopefully we can maybe convince other people to move forward with it too. I think, I guess maybe if they're flush with cash that much, maybe they should look at returning that to some of their citizens instead of not wanting to go after grant money. So,
A real key piece, we think, from the potential of submitting a raise application. One, you've already started the scoping phase and you've funded that locally. That shows you're in the game, right? You're interested and you want to move forward. You're not just going to wait for money to show up and then you'll take care of it. I think then also letters of support that you could get from your local agencies, community groups, state legislature, wherever we can get it, the more the merrier. Those go very strongly with a raise grant application. So those would be great opportunities to enhance your opportunity here.
Mr. Galston.
And this might have just been answered, and it's probably, you indicated that the raise grant application approval process takes, we'll say, a year and a half? Okay. Can you pay retroactively then? So we can, anything that's gone out there that we've paid for, can you retroactively ask for it to be reimbursed? Or is it anything after that application process has been approved?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's exactly the question I had last night, and I think I maybe have given Grand Forks confusion on that topic. The answer is no, you cannot go retroactive to once the grant application is signed. So let's just say you find out in June that you've won an award. Let's just say it takes 18 months. It's going to be the end of 2025 when you actually get your agreement signed. It's at that point moving forward when you can spend money and be reimbursed for it. Anything prior to that date, you would not be able to be reimbursed for it.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I like the sound of this. I like the way it's, the scoping of it. I think it would be a show of good faith from us to our friends in Grand Forks, the fact that we'll have fresh data, and the question is unanswered at the start. What South End Bridge or bridge solutions do we need to accomplish our traffic objectives, both bringing agricultural and commercial vehicles around the edge of our community, as well as connecting the neighborhoods? And we're not guiding the process from this side of the river. It's all data-driven, and it's all fact-finding, and it's all problem-solving in a strategic way. And I think this would be a really important step to showing anyone who has a doubt about are these bridges necessary or not, to clarify and answer that question.
Reid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think to the last question that Mr. Galsted raised and the answer that Mr. Holte gave on the ability to retroactively request grant funds, I do think that poses an important question for all of us to consider in how we move forward. I discussed this with Mr. Holte this morning. The next step of this process, as he described, is the Pell process, which we would be ready to start potentially within the next few months to 6 months, right? That we don't have a cost estimate from SRF to conduct that portion of it yet, but when he showed the schedule in his presentation tonight, it's going to take 2 years to conduct that process alone. So we can all imagine the cost of conducting that study. It's going to be significant for our communities. So it does pose a question in my mind of, do we strategically, if we apply for this RAISE grant, do we apply for the RAISE grant to include the Pell process? And if so, that would basically pause the study until we know whether or not we would receive the funds through RAISE to continue, or do we look at, as a community, local funds to continue the Pell process without interruption in the immediate future, and then apply for the RAISE grant to be able to fund the NEPA phase and beyond? I think that's whether there needs to be an answer on that tonight, probably not, but just wanted to pose that question to all of you. I think that's an important one for us, our strategy, to be able to direct SRF on how we're going to propose this grant application and what elements of it we'd like to have included.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have anything? Ben.
Thank you. Reid, I had about the same question. If we include the Pell study in this, in the grant portion of it, you said it could take 12 to 18 months to sign the contract. So if we were to include the Pell study in that, if we get awarded in June, then we're essentially pausing the entire process for 18 months if we include the Pell study in there. Okay, thank you.
Question about that. What's the dollar amount for the Pell's study?
Ken, I'll answer to start, and if you want to add, please do. Ken and I discussed that this morning. There isn't a good number that they're prepared to be able to provide to us yet, because the scope of the Pell study is still under review. And once that review is final, then SRF will be able to put a better number to it. I don't have a number in front of me to be able to share it tonight. I don't know that Ken does either, but it will be significant.
That's a number we would want, I think, to decide, should it go now or should it maybe wait and go in the grant? The scale of that, the size of that dollar amount would have a lot of bearing on where we would want to put that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, and that's absolutely a fair question to ask. I would share this because I know that's an important ask to have. So I've been doing some research just in the last 24 hours on potential. So as I mentioned earlier, we found a couple of Pell studies that have been approved by the Federal Highway Administration and have been moved forward. One of them was to the tune of about $700,000. The other, and that was a fairly rural scenario. The other one was to the tune of more like closer, just a hair over $1 million. That was a bit more of a urban scenario. So just so some of those impacts, I do not know specifics of how many alternatives they looked at, the duration of the project. So things like how much public involvement you do, you know, if you're the meetings, and if you've got a lot of technical meetings or advisory meetings, or you know, if you're meeting PMTs meeting every month. We did not necessarily propose to do that. We were going to do it more every other month to try and tune some things down. So I don't have a comparative to that, but I would say, you know, I hate to do it, but I think that's the ballpark. That's what I think is the initial range until we can actually get in. And I would say we would hope to have a better draft of a number by the end of this month, so it could be fed into the decision of or what could be included in the Pell, or excuse me, in the raise application. But at the moment, we don't have a specific number.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? I see none. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Certainly.
Anything else to read on that, or move on?
Move on. Thank
Okay.
you, Ken, for your time.
All right, number 2, request for gate on road asphalt plant site. Nancy Ellis.
Just going to introduce John Zavril, and I'll let him let you know about his request. They're looking at gating off the north-south road from just north of County Road 17 into their property, based on the fact that no one else needs access on that road at this point, and it'll just keep other traffic off of it. And so I'll let John go ahead and let you know what his request is.
I guess what we're requesting, that's on, right?
Yep.
Yep, is to put a gate on from County 17, roughly 150 feet in, so a guy could drive in there, a truck could drive in there, unlock the gate, open it, and drive through without restricting traffic on the road. And it would also access, so people, if they turned in there by mistake, they could turn around on a crossing and go out there. But we've had a lot of activity this summer with people just driving out there. We're worried about liability, and for us and the city, I guess, because it's your property. And we might, on the other entrance off of Highway 2, we're thinking of trying to sign that to say no enter, so people wouldn't come off the highway and try and drive in there. And if that doesn't work, we would like a gate there too, just in case, to try and, that is a restricted crossing anyway. And so I guess if the city needed access, we're willing to give them a key for the lock. If in future that land gets developed and there's other people in there, we'd be willing to take the gate down and move it down farther to our property. But we didn't think putting it down by our property would be very good to let people drive in about half a mile and try and turn around, and especially in the winter and get stuck and all that stuff. So that's about it.
Anybody have any questions? Amir?
Any concern for fire or emergency access?
No, we aren't. And if there is, like I say, we'd share a key with the city, but there should be no concern. And it would be active, it would be open. In the winter, there would be no activity.
Thank you, Mr. President. John, I haven't been down the road, so when you come off of 17 and you drive north down to your property, is there like a ditch on the side of the road so you have an approach to go into your property, or is it just all wide open?
A ditch on both sides.
Okay, so you could actually put a gate on that approach then into the plant itself and leave the actual road open?
Could. I guess then you got people driving in there, like if it's winter, we aren't keeping that road active. They could try and four-wheel in there and get stuck, I guess. And
Is that a public road, Nancy?
Public right-of-way at this point, yes.
But we're not maintaining it for snow removal or anything yet?
No.
Anybody else have anything?
I guess a question for Nancy, or just in theory, does this want to be a private road if there's only one business using it? I'm not understanding why we would want to retain city ownership there.
We want to keep it public because as the property develops to the south of it, we want the others to be able to have access to that without having to get some sort of an agreement between all of the property owners as to how it's maintained, those types of things. So right now, we're not maintaining it because there's nothing going on. There's no activity out there. There's no activity in the winter. It's going to maintain gravel. As you recall, in that special use permit, at some point, it will be paved. But the only other person that owns property out there right now, I think you guys have a contract for deed for all of the property to the south of that, correct?
correct. And American Crystal is Jason on the other side.
Yes, yeah, and they have access to it on their own land. One of the concerns that he had mentioned at the north end, what we call fourth, is that MnDOT currently has it, that access is an agricultural access is what they call it. It's not because it's for agricultural, it's for a limited type of a use. We will be studying that access, looking at closing the left turn in. MnDOT is looking at closing that, and then just doing a right in, right out. And so at this point in time, I think why their concern is that because of safety reasons, and they've noticed that other contractors have been using that road, just to kind of limit the access to when it's, when the plant itself is open, so that there's not a lot of activity on that.
And that's on the 4th Street there on the north side of the property?
Yep.
Okay. You can see it on Google Maps now that
Yep.
trail's kind of developed there.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And Ron has suggested that we do have put together some sort of a document so that when it does in fact get developed or it sells, so that it's not just one owner, that it does then open back up and become a public right-of-way again, and the gate gets removed, so.
So in that scenario, if it sold to another private owner, we would just ask Savrils to move their gate?
Yep.
Further north, essentially?
Yeah, if they wanted to gate off their own property, that's completely up to them, their own approach. But I think at this point, they're just trying to limit the amount of traffic that's using the north-south road. And then, if they are in fact using it because of the ditching, they're not turning around. They're going all the way up to 4th and then coming out. And with that being a limited access at this point, I think that's why they want to just gate it off, to eliminate that situation. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have anything? I see none. Thank you, sir. All right, move on to number 3, request to file plans and specifications for 2022 City Project number 3, Quiet Zone. Mr. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Council. We are currently requesting to file plans and specifications for the Quiet Zone project and looking for authorization to proceed with advertising. We have worked through MnDOT, did get the plans approved to state aid standards, which will allow us to use state aid funds for any of the reconstruction work that we need to do on 2nd Avenue. So we're still currently working with BNSF, working with Ron and Reid, trying to get necessary construction, maintenance agreements, closure agreements. They're being reviewed currently, trying to get those documents in place. In my last discussion with BNSF, just with timing, they're not 100% sure at this time if they'll be able to get the railroad signals and gates at 2nd Avenue replaced this construction season to be able to establish the quiet zone. But, again, my goal would be to get the project bid early, to get our best prices, and then if prices do come in good, we would look at doing the street, the pedestrian improvements, getting that done in that June to end of August, first part of September timeframe while school's out. During that same time frame, Burlington Northern would do the at-grade crossings to allow pedestrians to cross in those areas, so that work would be completed. I have asked, even if the signals, the gates, can't be completed till October, November, that's would be fine, because then we'd still be able to look at establishing the quiet zone, say sometime late fall, early winter, so that they'd be able to quit essentially blowing, their horns. So I can't get any promise from BNSF at this point or commitment as far as just timing when they're going to be able to get their stuff completed. But again, the biggest maybe unknown right now is just what is the cost for the work just for the street and ADA improvements, going to include or going to be, we're estimating about $676,000. The at-grade crossing surfaces, with that work to be completed by BNSF, they're estimating about $110,000 right now. I've heard they typically estimate that high. We're hoping that that'll come in a little bit cheaper, and then one unknown is basically the flagging operations during construction. Anytime the contractor's working within 25 feet of the center line of the railroad, BNSF's got to have a flagging person there. However, if we are able to coordinate with our contractor and BNSF where they're doing the surface crossings kind of at the same time, they would have a flagger there. So then essentially we would not get charged of our contractors working at that same time. So again, I threw a number in there of 50,000. I think BNSF said to have a flagger there was anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800 a day. I think if you call them up, they're there for 2 hours, you get billed for an 8-hour day type of thing. So again, we just threw in a number of 50,000. Just project funding at this time. Again, BNSF, as I guess it was maybe an incentive, I would call it, to closing 3rd Street. They did offer, they would pay the city $156,203. MnDOT is going to pay for half of the cost of the traffic signal upgrades that we have to do at 2nd and 4th. So their cost, or what MnDOT would cover, would be about $32,000. Right now, we're estimating that we'd utilize about $200,000 of our state aid construction funds, again, for the work at 2nd Avenue Northeast. And then we do have, about a remaining balance of just a little under, let's say, $450,000 that Reid and Carla and I have been visiting about, and I don't think we've determined totally where all that, where those funds or monies would come from, what different funds, but, I think some of the things we're looking at was some of this, street funds, storm sewer fund, just different things like that, so. And the one thing I don't have in here is, again, at Second Avenue, the signals, the gates totally need to be replaced. They're outdated to meet all the requirements for a quiet zone. So MnDOT has agreed they're going to pay for all of those costs to replace that entire signal system. So again, I don't have it listed because, again, I don't know what the cost is. It's going to be no cost to the city, but that is something the MnDOT is paying also. So I guess at this time, again, we're going to be just looking for authorization to proceed with advertising and just setting a bid date, which I'm looking at right now about February 7th. So I guess any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Emery? See none, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Number 4, requested change youth snowmobile race event. Mr. Huttunen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thanks to Ms. Nelson. She's stayed in contact with Corey, one of the organizers for this event, as it's been nearing. The date schedule's been nearing with the lack of snowfall. They were not able to hold the event as planned, but still had desire to if we get more snow. And they can get a track built. They desire to hold the event, of course, at a date to be determined. They also requested that if the track conditions are good, could they hold an event potentially a couple weekends in a row, because they're in the same situation in a lot of communities in Minnesota they usually travel to. So I just wanted to throw that in front of you all, if you're willing to continue the event moving forward without a known date, and if the date can be established, if they can run a couple weekends in a row down in Lefebvre Park.
I think it's a good event. I think it brings money downtown and visitors, so I don't have a problem with it. Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I would agree. I went to this event either last winter or the winter before, and I was impressed at how organized it was, all the safety precautions, and the amount of investment made by the parents, I think, here. And so I would strongly encourage it. I think East Grand Forks could be a hub for these type of events going forward.
Anybody else have anything? I see none, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks. Entertaining a motion to adjourn. Moved by Vetter. Second by Larson. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Means adjourned. Move into the special meeting. Call to order the special meeting for the City of East Grand Forks for January 9th, 2024. It's 5:47. City Clerk, please call roll.
Here.
Here.
Council President Mark Holte.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Reed.
Here.
Council members Clarence Vetter.
Here.
Ben Hutchinsky.
Here.
Dale Helms.
Here.
Ryan Larson.
Here.
Karen Peterson.
Does term quorum. Number 1, consider adopting resolution number 24-01-07, authorizing staff to enter an agreement with SRF Consulting for the raised grant application and contribute 25% or $7,101 for the contract amendment proposal. Is there a motion? Moved by Vetter,
Second.
second by Larson. Questions or discussion? Mr. Larson.
Yeah, just a question, I guess, trying to understand what the other contributing entities are willing to pay here. I think we should discuss our thoughts on, do we have to contribute more than 25% to ensure that we don't lose the opportunity for this raise grant?
You want to touch base on that, Reid, or?
Yeah, I can update with the information that I know as of today. The Grand Forks County Board acted on it at their meeting last week, and they agreed to contribute their 25% portion. There was a statement of that they would like to see all 4 agencies participate equally in order for their portion to be 25%. So depending upon what action other councils or boards may take, that may affect their willingness. I don't have a really clear answer on that, but that was the interpretation I took from it. Polk County Board has not acted on it yet. They have it on their agenda for next week with the staff recommendation to participate at a full 25% share. And then the Grand Forks City Council discussed it with the presentation at their meeting last night and has a council meeting next Tuesday, the 16th, in which they would act on it. The same request to participate as a 25% share of the total.
So what does the schedule look like? If all four parties don't agree to it, is there an opportunity for us to revisit this motion to ensure we don't lose the opportunity? I want to balance that with not offering to pay someone else's bill up front either. That's not how we want to do business.
I guess we'd have the option later to go back and amend what we do tonight. I'd rather see us stick to the 25%, but I understand where you're coming from. But I think we would have the opportunity to go back and take a look at it. Like I said, it'd be a shame if we didn't take this opportunity. And short-sighted is going to be a word I use consistently with some people. So,
That answers my question. Thank you.
Mr. Bitter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I just wanted to point out, too, the 25% is $7,100, and to leverage $7,100 to possibly get a grant of $10 million or more to do this study, that just sounds like a no-brainer to me. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
And I think we all want to make it quite clear that the study that we're talking about has to be done before any bridges will be built. This is not just a study to do a study to do a study to a study. This is the incremental steps toward identifying where the bridges should be and then actually building the bridges. All necessary work that has to be done to build a bridge, either of these bridges.
Anybody else have anything? If not, we'll take roll call, please.
Kaminsky.
Yes.
Mearkau.
Yes.
Helms.
No.
Olsted.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
Peterson. Yes. Better.
Yes.
Motion is carried. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh.
Moved by Ben Prochminski,
Second.
second by Larson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned.